The numbers, of course, are good. The question is what lies behind the numbers.
Nobody can accuse the Modi government of not bringing in economic reforms. You can accuse and say this reform was not good, demonetization.
India goes to poll on April 19. The Bharatiya Janata Party under Prime Minister Narendra Modi has its eyes set on coming back to power for the third consecutive time at the centre, while the opposition, led by the India bloc, is looking to break its streak. The economic performance and the welfare schemes of a country remain a major decisive factor for any citizen when they enter the voting booths. To declutter the numbers and shed light on the various aspects it shows, the Economic Times spoke to two prominent economists. Surjit Bhalla, a policy veteran with the experience of having worked with Prime Minister Narendra Modi's Economic Advisory Council, and former Reserve Bank of India Governor Raghuram Rajan.
It is about the most appropriate way to describe the Indian economy post 22 or post 2021 when we had the COVID experience. And we can go into as to when, even prior to that, we had a reasonably strong economy, except in 2018 and 19. So what happened in 2018 and 19? We had the highest real interest rates ever observed in India. And that caused the growth rate to go down to below 4%, if you recall, in 2019-20. So, and obviously our fiscal year ends in March. So this included a very little effect of the drawdown. The big effect was the unnecessarily, in my view, very, very tight monetary policy followed by the RBI. So if you take out those 2 years of that 1 year, 2019-20, we had reasonably solid growth from 2015-16 onwards. And then from 2022-23 onwards, it's really, or 21-22 onwards, it's really a solid economy in terms of GDP growth. Now let's look at inflation, the other twin side of Goldilocks. So Goldilocks had one hat, which was growth, and the other hat was inflation. And inflation has been extremely well behaved, especially given what's happened in the rest of the world. Now, here there is a very interesting divergence between inflation in developing countries and inflation in the advanced countries post-COVID. Never before has it been the case that the inflation in developing countries was lower than the inflation in the advanced economies. Now, the advanced economies were hit by a double whammy. One, their very, very expansionary policy during COVID, and second, the war in Ukraine, which has dragged on for a long time. So that has made it difficult for the Western economies to reduce inflation, though it has come down quite considerably. In India, on the other hand, it's been very well managed, the macroeconomy. We didn't pump up the economy like they did in the US. So the fiscal deficits were very well controlled. And inflation also was well under control, except for that 1 year that happened. So, when was the last time? Let me ask you. We are growing somewhere close to certainly above 7.5%. And it might indeed be, and we can discuss as to why the pointers to GDP growth in India today are upwards of 8% on a long-term basis. I'm not talking 23, 24. I'm talking over the next 4 or 5 years, that I would be quite surprised if GDP growth is less than 8%. And this is, mind you, assuming that we don't have a world war, we don't have exogenous shocks. So yes, in conclusion, it's been a remarkable recovery for India post-COVID. And indeed, all the indicators suggest it's been extremely remarkable.
The numbers, of course, are good. The question is what lies behind the numbers, and is this sustainable at seven? Actually, numbers say 8.5. Is that a sustainable picture? And I think that in order to get a good sense of how all this is going, you want to ask what is a sustainable rate of growth. To some extent, the GDP growth numbers are flattering. Flattering because the deflator we use is very low. The GDP deflator is used to subtract from the nominal GDP estimates to get the real GDP. And today it's about 1.5. So even with nominal GDP growth at 9%, you get pretty high real GDP growth. But of course, the question is, what is true inflation? Is it 1.5 or is it more like 4 or 5? And once you subtract the true measure of inflation, you get more like 6%, 5 to 6% growth. And that would be what would emerge over time as this GDP deflator sort of normalizes. We already see oil prices going up, the deflator will go up. The broader question is this growth providing enough jobs? And there, I think the question is a lot more, the answer has to be a lot more nuanced. It is providing more jobs in construction, which is a success of the government. The government has engaged in tremendous amounts of infrastructure construction, and that has also energized private development of houses and so on. But if you look at employment in other sectors, one of the biggest concerns is that employment in agriculture is going up, according to the PLFS, while employment in manufacturing hasn't picked up despite all the energy that the government devotes to manufacturing. And employment has come down. So these are big sources of worry that the only jobs we seem to be creating are construction, but not in the sectors that we would want to develop, especially as we go forward. You can see this in the kind of attraction that government jobs have. Huge numbers of people applying for government jobs because private sector jobs are not being created. I think there's a lot more continuity than people think. So I don't subscribe to the white paper that the government put out, which sort of tried to say that everything was bad 10 years ago and everything is good now, or the reverse, which is, some of the problems we have today are long-standing and have emerged over the years. For example, very few governments have paid attention in a big way to improving the quality of our education. I mean, they've all sort of said they are, and the Vajpayee government did for example, Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan was I think initiated in that time, and that was a good move. But we are that's an area where we are underperforming, and no single government deserves the blame. But I think there is a continuity otherwise. For example, think of digital stack, started in the UPA, but expanded under NDA. So I think that's one should take all that into account. Similarly, the GST was proposed during UPA, opposed by many of the politicians who supported today under the NDA, and then brought in under the NDA. I think that in the longer run, GST will serve India well. So I think you need to think about this as continuity rather than an abrupt change. That said, I think where we need more action is absolutely in the area of preparing our people for the 21st century and the changes that are to come. And that means healthcare, that means education, that means skilling. Without a focus on all those, we certainly are not prepared for the 21st century, and it'll be difficult for us to become a developed nation. Ultimately, I think where this government has succeeded is in infrastructure build out. Where it has not is in creating enough good jobs.
Now we come to UPA 1, what you're calling UPA 1, 2004 onwards. And UPA 1 started, and disinvestment started under Bajpayee. UPA 1 came in, and the very first day, I think it was Bardhan, said, disinvestment to bhar mein jaye. So the point is that I'm happy to discuss with you or anybody else, what was, name me one major economic reform that happened during 2004 to 2014. Matter of fact, I can mention several negative reforms, which I'll go to, but there were initiatives taken like we should have direct tax reform. Absolutely. Same thing with this government, we should have, and hopefully we will finally have direct tax reform. Aadhaar was brought in by UPA 2 and got off to a slow start, where the opposition itself, Modi and the BJP, were criticizing Aadhaar, and many people within the Congress were also criticizing Aadhaar. हमारी independence chali jayegi, hamari identity chali jayegi, ye wo. So basically, while it was a very, very good initiative, nothing happened. Okay. So I am pressed to find out as to what were the reforms. At the same time, global growth between 2004 to 2013 was the highest the world has seen. Okay. Kabhi bhi nahi duniya mein such a high average growth rate. So like, rising tide will lift all boats. So we already had got a momentum under Bajpayee of basically the foundations for economic growth, and they were carried through in 2004 to 13 without any help of reforms, but basically there was impetus and it continued. So we grew well, but not very well in comparison to the rest of the world. So if you look at the excess growth as to how did India grow 2004 to 13, how did the rest of the world grow, that gap between 2004-13 and 2014 to 24 is much higher in 2014 to 24. So there is what happened in UPA 1 and 2. Now I'll come to NDA 1 and 2. Now, nobody can accuse the Modi government of not bringing in economic reforms. You can accuse and say this reform was not good, demonetization, for example. Now, demonetization, I've written, I think, paved the way for your increase in tax revenues. And I remember writing at that time that one reason for demonetization was that it will improve the transparency and improve the tax compliance. For the last 75 years, certain wealth creators were favored by the government. Okay, and certain wealth creators not. Okay. So if you are only software was not favored by the government, but everything else forever, and every country, that's industrial policy. Okay, and that's markets. So the question we should be asking is are we allowing inefficiency to flourish? That's not good. Now, and are we allowing monopolists to continue? Now, monopoly is very difficult today in this global world. Okay, you'll have a Chinese, you'll have American, you'll have Indian. So wo zamana chala gaya. But I find that the world has changed enormously, yet our debates remain the same. Hi dama inequality बढ़ गई, hi dama ये हो गया, this guy is being favored. मेरे को तो समझ नहीं आता. Unless you show me that this is, when did it not happen? Which country does it not happen? Korea, chaebols. You know about chaebols. They control the government and the businesses, and the country flourish, and the people flourish, and they flourish. So I think we should look at the proof on the ground that inequality, just like the poor will always be with us, the rich will always be with us.
Okay.
Okay? You're not going to, there are some people who tried to control the world and their population, and there were two of them, Pol Pot and Mao Zedong. Now, they tried to control everything. Yeah, you couldn't move there. They taxed you, and if you got educated, you were told to go plow the fields. ये वो. So, अगर आपको वो चाहिए तो ठीक है, मगर दुनिया को वो नहीं चाहिए. Maybe 10 people in India want that. Fine. ठीक है, we're a free country. No, you can want anything you want. ठीक है, but for policy that we should know.
I have no problem with wealth creation if it is free and fair. Having privileged wealth creation is a problem because that privilege comes at the expense of the rest. So I am against, a few gathering all the benefits because they have access to government support, while the rest are sort of floundering without that. And so as far as possible, it seems to me the government should create a level playing field where no entrepreneur is privileged. And, outsiders don't see it as a necessity to get the help of specific entrepreneurs to ensure they have the right government policies. I think that creates a very bad image globally.